This is Jill taking you through this paper on developing leadership character in business programs. Now, because we're trying to access this paper in order to consider whether character development might be something useful to you, we need to not overemphasize the fact that this paper is written mainly for people like me, for faculty, helping them integrate leadership development into courses. What we want is a tool or a model or something that would help us do that within our current leadership course. So scrolling down, let's have a look at the abstract. The objective is to encourage and enable leadership character development in business education. A model, so we seem to be onto a good thing here, a model of character strengths and their link to virtues, values and ethical decision making. We describe an approach to develop leadership character at the individual, group and organisational levels. So we've got a model, might want to look out for that as we scroll through the paper, and we've also got this interesting framework of looking at leadership character development at an individual level, so you personally, within a group, so how you might help others to develop their leadership characteristic and how group dynamics might affect leadership character emergence, and also looking at the organisational level. So does the organisation support leadership character development? Is there something about its context that demands a lot of you as a leader? The middle part I haven't highlighted because that's talking about the background to the paper that's not relevant to us. But it's worth just looking at that last comment. We highlight that the development of a leadership character must extend beyond student engagement in a course, since it takes a village to develop character. What that means is I need to support you in this. That a university as a whole or a business school as a whole should buy into this notion that we should not only impart knowledge in courses, but we should help you develop who it is you are and want to become. This part of the paper on the right here, most of the people at the heart of the crisis, paragraph which I've highlighted, is emphasising the fact that this paper emerged from the financial crisis. It takes a quote from The Economist, a magazine that no doubt you guys will all be aware of, that's global, highly respected, in which it was discussed or pointed out that a number of the very high-level managers within organisations heavily involved in the financial crisis of 2009 were MBA graduates. So they had come out of very prestigious business schools. So the question was raised, shouldn't we develop leadership character in business programs? Because surely if these guys are highly qualified, they should have had some type of development of their character in these programs to help them with ethical decision making, which is why the abstract refers to ethical decision making. Now, we're not so worried about ethical decision making in our course. It might be a factor. You might feel there's something that the client is asking you to do which is ethically compromising, but we're more arguably interested in just whole character development for you to become better leaders. Here I've highlighted this point because it brings to the fore this notion of whether leadership character can be taught. Now, my stance, as you know, in class is one which says character development is possible, but you will never become, or rarely will you become, unless you have some very critical incident in your life, somebody very, very, very different from who you are. So we're talking about being aware of who you are and wondering whether you can develop your leadership characteristic in a positive way, rather than transforming yourself. This part on the right here brings your attention to the fact that the authors of this paper have used an 800-page book devoted to the classification and descriptions of virtues and character strengths, and they adopt their definitions here. They've used the book to identify 6 universal virtues that are common across a broad sample of cultures, religions, moral philosophers, and these are wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance and transcendence. So we know that we've got 6 universal virtues that we can look at, that everybody, irrespective of where they come from in life, should be able to relate to these universal virtues that underpin good character. It goes through them: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance and transcendence, and you might want to read those in detail. But again, let's scroll down. Here we have some type of model that's talking about situational pressures, where obviously in the simulation you're under quite a lot of pressure to perform for the client, your interns, you want a job, and that will be common throughout your career, that leadership will come to the fore when you wish to excel or face some type of challenge. In this article, they're emphasising that those situational pressures might have an ethical dimension because of the origins of the paper, but we can interpret it in a way that suits us. Situational pressures: want to get on in work, want to perform well, face a new challenge, how do I cope? And they talk about how the intent to behave well and reflecting on values, virtues and traits can raise your awareness of who you are as a person, how your character interacts with your work, and therefore take some better decisions and judge those situations more astutely. Now this looks like something interesting. It's a table. It has the virtues on the left hand side. So those elements from that, taken from that 800-page book, which are deemed to be the characteristics that are good and that everyone can relate to. And then in the middle we have a virtuous mean. So what this table is saying, that if you interpret or possess rather these characteristics, then all should be well. You should be able to develop a sound, ethical, valuable leadership character. But that if you have a deficiency in any element, so let's take creativity, then it will exhibit itself as being unoriginal. You won't have any original thinking. But if you take your creativity too far, it can, in excess, become impractical. Now, my advice to you, if you wish to use this concept of leadership character in your work on this course, is to identify 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 virtuous elements that you particularly relate to, that you feel are weaknesses, so you often exhibit a deficiency or an excess, or ones that you feel are particularly important for this simulation. So either strengths, things that you're good at, weaknesses, things that you exhibit a deficiency or excess in, or have a tendency to, or elements that this situation particularly demands. So you might take, for example, generosity. Are you generous at a group level in how you're contributing to the group, or are you tending to be stingy in the group work? Or are you being profligate, so you're contributing too much and stifling everybody else's opportunity to be a leader? Or you might look at persistence. Are you persisting to get your head round this very difficult, messy challenge of the client? Or are you giving up and exhibiting laziness? Or are you too much of a zealot, where you're going ahead with your way of thinking and you're, to use Gooden Sharma's terms, the other paper that is in this course, you're imposing a certain mindset on the rest of the group. So this is how you can have a discussion with this table, how you can take out of it some interesting ideas and then work with those ideas at a very personal level to determine where you might want to develop your character, how you might want to test, for example, whether you have an excess in terms of forgiveness or in terms of compassion or in terms of spirituality. So think of some, if you like, ways you can use this table to your own advantage. Here in the main text we go back to this notion of whether character can be taught, and they are in this paragraph emphasising that MBA students and business students can sometimes be very driven and therefore not reflective and morally aware. Here they focus on the debate between yes, you can develop your character, and no, you can't. So on the yes side, Aristotle, way back in Greek times, saw character as something that is not formed on one's own, but rather that requires relationships and community. It is only through sharing our interests and goals with others that the bonds of kinship allow us to develop social virtues. So it is saying that, as with leadership, you need to develop your character in association with other people. And the above paragraph says, for many of the ancient Greeks, including Plato and Aristotle, it was not so much that character could be taught, but rather character is something that is habituated. So it's an experience that you accumulate over time, and you develop habits that exhibit your character. And maybe it's some of those habits that you are looking at throughout the simulation. On the no side, the paper's authors present and rebut every criticism that character development cannot happen. And again, I'm not going to focus on that in detail. If you very much want to take the stance that for you character development is not relevant, then by all means read that and argue that in your case, in your reflective practice report. This is quite an interesting quote. If we believe that our students are largely incapable of developing the skills to deal with complex situations, we should also stop teaching strategy, finance, operations and management and marketing. So it's saying, just because leadership characteristic is difficult, it's messy, it's an individual take on a situation and a person, then that doesn't mean you should give up, because all of these other subjects represent complex situations. Here, to reinforce that point in the abstract, the authors expand on what it means to have a leadership of self, a leadership of others, and a leadership of the organisation. So you might want to have a look at those definitions and say, well, what have I done to develop my character at the level of self, at the level of others, and at the level of organisation? And you could have some type of matrix in your reflective practice report that talks of how you developed yourself, how you've developed your character as regards others, and as regards the organisational demands. Make it work for you. Again, this is quite an interesting reflective statement that I've highlighted. The challenge is that character development occurs at a very personal level. It is not something that one simply knows or acquires from reading about it. Rather, character strengths such as courage or humility can be learnt while in the process of learning about functional competencies through how the student engages with the learning experience. So think about how you're engaging with the challenge that the client has set you. And understand your character through looking at how you are engaging. How are you reacting to what the client is asking of you, and therefore what does that say about your leadership character? Leadership researchers have long suggested that effective leaders need to develop self-awareness and reflection capabilities, and that's very much what we're doing in this course. Can you, through the simulation, become aware of your leadership character and attempt to develop it reflectively? This I've chosen not to highlight because it talks more about implications for faculty, so it's relevant to people like me wanting to integrate character development into a course. But I have highlighted a couple of comments that students have written to the authors of this article, having undergone a course which focuses on character development. So one student wrote, "Throughout this course I'm excited to learn about myself so that I can be an effective leader. Before reading the article on transcendent leadership, which must have been something they were given in the course, I never recognised in its entirety how important an understanding awareness of self is. It obviously makes sense. A leader who does not align their values and the values of the organisational strategic direction will not be able to effectively gain trust or respect of his/her team. So how are you aligning your values with the organisational values of AstraZeneca? Only by having a more thorough and in-depth understanding of self can a leader then effectively be able to deliver. I'm excited to participate in this journey. And in this course, you are very much asked to take charge of your own learning. I cannot tell you, maybe I might have a view, and others in your group might have a view about your character, but you need yourself to become aware of your character and how it impacts what it is you're doing within the group work. Here's another comment from a student. I must admit that when I first signed up for this course, I really did not know what I was getting myself into. I've always been a reflective individual who took the time to write a journal growing up. However, in university, that reflection piece got put to the back shelf, and you might find this. Throughout the degree programme you've been doing, or throughout your accountancy qualifications, you've been focusing on knowledge, and this course is a contrast to that, allowing you to understand yourself. I found the reflection component, says the student, and the ability to discover myself and my values to be the most precious part of taking this course. So those are just some comments from students who were within the course that the authors of this paper designed. And that's it. You can maybe look up some of these references if they particularly interested you. But as you can see, the article is very well researched. So that's it. Stand back from this paper, maybe print it out, read it yourself. You might get something slightly different from the paper from that which I've taken you to. That's fine. My point is mainly that this paper is accessible, despite it being written for faculty. It's accessible in terms of that table it gives you about character development. It's accessible in terms of giving you reasons why you should develop your character, and it tells you how to become self-aware and wonder about what aspects of your character you could work on. I hope that's useful.